Hey guys, today's video is about a film I first thought I actually wasn't going to be doing a review on, so full spoilers ahead. 2025 Sinners was a surprise for me, because when I first saw the teaser trailer months ago, I wasn't admittedly that impressed with what I saw. After the movie came out and had been in theaters for a while, I didn't go. However, I came across a particular scene for the movie online, and I gotta say, it earned my attention. It made me very curious about what else the film had in store. I gotta say, this movie is very memorable and has some great stuff in it. To be clear, I do have some serious issues with the film, the vampire aspect specifically, though that'll be discussed later. The music, the historical significance, the struggle and heart of the black community and those connected with them, the evils and sinister legacies of slavery and Jim Crow. All of these tied together to really build up the story. There is a lot of great stuff within this film that defines its very soul. One of my two favorite scenes and two of my three favorite characters really hit this home with one of the most powerful and significant scenes I've seen in any movie. Not to mention, this movie had one of my favorite antagonists in a film I've ever seen, with a specific scene that's another of one of my favorites in the film, though there's a lot more that could and should have been done with it. There's a lot for me to talk about, so let's get into it. Sinners takes place in Clarksville, Mississippi in 1932, a town with a long history of bigotry and cruelty, stretching back to the days of slavery, and also a significant part of the history of blues music, both of which are integral to the film. We see the story shaped by characters such as the twins, Smoke and Stack, both incredibly well portrayed by Michael B. Jordan, her cousin Sammy, who I'll explain more in a little bit, Annie, a hoodoo practitioner, and one of my favorite characters, Delta Slim, a blues legend, and another favorite character of mine, Mary, a white passing young woman played by Haley Steinfeld, and Remick, an Irish vampire who acts as the main antagonist, and another favorite character of mine, who I will also talk about in detail more later. You have a great cast of characters played by an amazing cast who put their hearts into their performances to bring this film to life. Each brought a defining element to this movie that made itself like that of the song: passion, love, tragedy, and heartbreak. As Annie explained in the intro of the film, there are legends of people gifted with making music so true it connects them to their communities beyond the present itself. Sammy Moore is revealed to be one of those gifted individuals, who is a part of the griot legacy and lineage, to the best of my understanding, given that they were the only African group mentioned in the film, and the other two were represented by other characters in the movie. Please correct me if I'm wrong about this. He's an aspiring blues musician that wishes to be able to be free to play his music wherever and with whoever he wants, though he does find some resistance from his pastor father, who wishes him to put away his guitar and dream, which he states more than once both in private and before a congregation as sin and dancing with the devil, and to be a fully devout Christian. Sammy isn't completely disconnected from his father and his upbringing, showing he knows the Bible's verses without even having to look at the book while fully reading the text, and works hard as a sharecropper, being out earlier than the others in the fields. He simply feels trapped where he lives, not just the church, but within his life in the South with Jim Crow and as a sharecropper. Smoke and Stack's new juke joint gave him the chance to embrace his music and to live the life he's dreamed of. Now, much like my other videos about reviews dealing with films that have foundational, cultural, and historical importance to minority communities, like Dreamkeeper and Killers of the Flower Moon, I know I'm not the best person to talk about these. I'm not a historian, nor am I a member of these communities connected with their history/heritage and communities, obviously. I just wish to show my respect within this video and all videos like it involving these subjects to do them and y'all justice. Please correct me if I get anything wrong. For this film, we see examples of the cruelties of Jim Crow and evils that terrorize and haunt the black community in both visual examples of it happening and retellings of certain characters. This involved the plot by Hogwood and the rest of the clan in that area to lure black folks and their friends to that sawmill for them to murder all of them. It was hinted at early in the film about the forge being lost and being revealed by Remick, Stack, and Bird, the last two was a former member of the clan and nephew of Hogwood, the Grand Dragon, to cover up the murders only to repeat the process. Another example was of Delta Slim telling the story of his dead friend Rice, both of whom had gotten money from white folks by playing music for them, though this was forced by local police, only for Rice to be assaulted, kidnapped, lynched, and his manhood cut off by the Klan. They made up a story to justify the murder, mirroring the stories of victims like Emmett Till and thousands more. The film isn't hesitant to speak about the evils done to this community. These few examples hardly even scratch the surface. Every piece of blunt honesty speaks about the generational trauma, anger, and constant fear this community has lived through, and the way it has shaped the day-to-day lives for centuries. This wasn't shot out and shoved in our face in every scene. We had specific moments that made this clear about the hardships and terrors. Stack talked to Mary about what he knew the clan and people like them would do to her if they discovered their relationship and connection, which is why he got her married to a white man and for her to pass as white despite her black ancestry. This is also similar to why Smoke didn't want to let Remick and his two thralls into their juke joint, because he was concerned about possible racist retaliation from them and or the local clan and other racist white folks, because of even small interactions that could be twisted as lies. It was a matter of survival, not just for individuals, but for the community as a whole. This isn't even going into detail about what the lost cause of the Confederacy crap did to justify and cover up all the racist bullshit that has happened and was happening. I only recently learned about this lost cause matter, like days before I wrote this review script recent. If you don't know what the lost cause thing is, I can provide some links about this if you wish to know. It's honestly terrifying. To shift to the blues music part of this film, we can see the epitome of this in one of the two best scenes in the film, in my opinion, along with one of my favorite musical moments in film in general. This is when in Club Juke, when Sammy is called by Delta Slim to perform for those present. Before Sammy played, he said for Sammy to tell the crowd who he is and where he's from. This is a recognition and confirmation of his connection to the personal lives and roots of his community. Now, when it comes to the music itself, we see the spiritual significance of Sammy being of the Griot lineage. When he plays the guitar and sings, we see the spirits of the ancestors and descendants of those present joining in the celebration and performance. The power of this scene cannot be understated. I Lie to You is an amazing song and much more. Much like Hoodoo, blues is a melding of African traditions and spiritualities. Given that slavery went about destroying traditions and customs of the people in bondage by those that held the whips. This scene of the song showed that the legacy and the spirits of their ancestors and their beliefs still beat within the hearts of their descendants, even if some didn't or don't know it. To be clear about the erasure of cultural/ethnic identity, there were some people in bondage who were already Christians. That does not mean those who weren't were any less victimized. Regardless, those Christians and those who were still a part of the beliefs and faiths of the Orishas and other possible deities. I don't know the exact number of faiths that were present for terrifyingly obvious reasons. They all became victim to a bastardized version of the Christian faith, one that didn't act with compassion and community, given all the preaching and forced conversions. Instead, it was fueled by cruelty and control. Sadly, that cruel form of Christianity still is in effect to this day, and it still victimizes different peoples. It was also present in this film in one form or another. Sammy's father was a part of this legacy, though I don't believe he realized this, in a heartbreaking manner. Instead of recognizing and respecting this gift Sammy had and the importance of this music, he called it sin. Now, if one finds comfort and happiness in the Christian faith and genuinely believes in and acts with compassion and empathy, that's good. To an extent, we saw Sammy's father go to his son with concern after he arrived from church after surviving the night with the vampires. He just kept demanding his son to give up what he loved and what he saw others sacrifice themselves for, in belief and love of the blues and its importance to how it connects their community. I've also heard people talk about Sammy having sold his soul, comparing him to the story of Robert Johnson, given some of his music. That's not the case here, given Sammy didn't die like how Robert Johnson did. There's also some who pinpoint that Johnson didn't meet the devil. Instead, he came across Papa Legba, Aloha, and a being I admittedly don't know much about. But one thing is that he isn't the devil. Though that's a topic for another discussion, I just thought I should point this out. I want to talk about Delta Slim and Annie for a minute. These two characters add some of the best elements to the film. Each of them presents a vital piece of Black history and culture, both the love and importance of music and the understanding and connection to the more innate mystical powers and energies of the world. Both are similar in character. They're honest, not afraid to call out people and actions, and they are protective of their communities and selfless in their own ways. Slim died protecting the people he cared about, even though only Sammy truly lived beyond what happened at the juke joint, and Annie died wishing to be reunited with her daughter while being free of the hatred of the moral world. They both stand in open opposition and rebelling against the cruelties of both Jim Crow and religious exclusivism, while also bringing life and healing to their communities in their own ways, whether through blues music or hoodoo. Annie was proven correct about her practices and the protection she gave Smoke before he left Delta. Even when the vampire stack tried to bite his brother's neck, the magic warded him off. Granted, both had their rough edges, given each of them threatened a leading character in the movie, though Delta Slim later died to protect Sammy, and Annie still loved Smoke, even when he plunged a stake into her heart. The film gave each of the characters complexity in some form or fashion. Now, before I get into discussing the last of my three favorite characters, I want to take time to talk about the vampires. At the start of the video, I talked about how originally I thought I wasn't going to watch the film, let alone do a review on it. It's admittedly because of my assumption about how the original trailers framed their vampires. I figured it's just going to be the same old stuff with vampires. Nothing really added to it or shaped in a way that wasn't the usual human good, vampire evil crap. To be honest, vampires get screwed over so much in writing. Near I thought they were going to make them part of the clan. Well, there was the one couple thrown away I didn't expect, which I'll get into in a minute. I've given my thoughts and feelings about entities like werewolves and vampires, seeing the possibility for their stories that I will say is unpopular, and has been the subject of, well, let's just say laughter and not so constructive criticism. The movie did screw over the vampires, though not totally in the way I thought originally. The vampires of Sinners were kinda a mixed bag in some ways. I can kinda compare them to the werewolves from Dog Soldiers. I was more recently informed the werewolves didn't actually die from headshots from normal bullets, like I thought. Megan didn't actually die from that headshot, and with Ryan it was just the case because of the silver that was punched into his body first, which negated his healing. But I still feel that's bullshit writing. These vampires had enhanced senses. For example, a greater sense of smell. Stat could sense an elderly Sammy was close to death by taking in his scent. Though this was inconsistent, as before most of the vampires' deaths, they couldn't hear or sense smoke sneaking up on Remick to help Sammy, even before Remick was severely maimed, and thus they were all feeling his pain. The vampires didn't show any real feats of superhuman strength or speed. Arguably the best feat of brute force came from the vampire Stack after he smashed the door down in the juke joint. While this is incredibly difficult to do, it's still humanly possible, and it took Stack literally throwing himself against the door with his whole body, rather than minimal effort one would expect from a vampire. They also didn't move any faster than a human while running. One example of this was the vampire Cornbread, who raced towards a man who had just woken up from falling asleep from drinking. He didn't move at superhuman speed at all. Not to mention, newly turned vampires didn't seem to have a great healing factor, as Cornbread was shot in the face by smoke, and didn't heal from this through the night, even after he fed on the man I mentioned moments ago. Remick was the exception to some of these unimpressive traits, given he's at most a little over 1500 years old, based on the brief explanation of his origins of being from Ireland when Christianity entered/invaded the land. Remick was able to endure being in sunlight for longer than any of his thralls, who were immediately engulfed in flames. Burns and bruises he had in his first on-screen appearance were healed in his next scene, at night and having fed on one of the former clansmen couple. However, on the ground he didn't show to be any faster or stronger than human, given he ran at Annie who threw pickled garlic on him before he could attack her, and Smoke managed to push him off. He showed a couple of times to have some sort of reflexes, being able to block or brush aside attacks, which is odd given Sammy managed to hit him with his guitar when he should have blocked it, though it didn't appear to be beyond human capability. One thing that was better though was their durability and resilience. Even though conventional bullets did slow them down and stung, they didn't kill them, even when they were shot in the heart and head. Much like the werewolves of Dog Soldiers, their resilience was one of the best parts about them. Remick also was the best example of this, and the silver piece of Sammy's guitar was literally embedded in his skull, and he pulled it out and he still wasn't dead. Despite this, I don't understand why the Choctaw vampire hunters that were tracking Remick early in the film fled when night came. Given what happened later in the film, I doubt Remick would have been able to actually deal with them given what he was capable of doing, and also him fleeing from them in terror. You'd think a centuries-old vampire could or would be able to massacre a band of humans, even if they were hunters. Plus, Remick said with their numbers they could go after Hogwood and his clansmen. It shouldn't take a bunch of vampires to overpower a bunch of humans, especially if they're not aware of how to fight them. A few other elements were things I found interesting or perplexing. Why did the vampires have different eye colors? Remick had red, which is the iconic vampire color, though this also is because of Remick's character inspiration, who I will reveal later. Most of the vampire thralls had yellow, and Stack's were blue. This part was never explained. They also had different sets of fangs. Stack and Mary had their canine teeth, and some incisors as fangs, while those like Cornbread and Remick had retractable fangs that extended over their human teeth, like the vampires from the show Supernatural. Remick was also the only one to have his fingers and nails capable of extending into claws. The different kinds of fangs is something that also wasn't explained. I've also been kinda uncertain about vampires having claws myself. It's something that I'm mixed on. Them also having like a hive mind was a surprise. Having a direct mental connection to their original sire is something I'm not sure I've seen before. It shaped their newly changed perceptions and beliefs to align with Remick's. This actually made the clansman couple no longer racist, and not view people who didn't fit their original bigoted views as equals. Them sharing Remick's pain, I'm a bit unsure about. I understand why he was in the film though. Overall, these vampires had some interesting traits, while severely lacking in others. Not the worst I've seen though. I think that maybe goes to the ones from Priest, at least in my opinion. As for Remick himself, he might be my favorite character in the film. Jack O'Connell really brought him to life. Remick had the other of my two favorite scenes in this film, and my favorite other song where he and his thralls sang and danced. It was hauntingly and tragically beautiful. It's actually the scene that made me want to see the film. Not to mention, it might be my favorite musical moment in a film involving an antagonist. It's that good. Sadly for this character, we didn't get to see enough of him in the film. His on-screen presence was only a fraction of what it should have been. Not to mention, we only got a small piece of his backstory. He was a human in Ireland whom he and his family had Christianity forced upon them and their home taken, which is why I don't understand why he said a Christian prayer gives him comfort given the religious trauma that was inflicted upon him. Though given I haven't had something like that happen in my life, I can't understand it. I just feel for him. His story mirrors those of black people in the United States, which is why he empathized and respected them. He openly spoke about his admiration for what the juke joint represented and how Sammy's gift healed and connected them. It's one of the elements that make his story so tragic, and another element of the vampires of this film that also screwed them over. It's also what made his worst action so cruelly ironic, given he didn't realize what he was doing mirrored what was done to him. Annie explained that the vampire souls were stuck in their bodies, unable to rejoin their ancestors, let alone connect with them. Remick's community, the one he knew centuries ago, is gone, as far as he knew and understood. Can you imagine his loneliness, his depression? He stated his wish clearly to Sammy. He wanted to see his people again. He wanted to be able to have that sense of community he had so many years ago. This was a piece of the writing for this film's vampire lore that I found more than a little fucked up. This man had his life torn asunder and possibly lost loved ones in the process. Now he has no way of connecting with them other than his hope for Sammy to summon them with his music. The sad thing is, if Sammy had used his music, I fear because of this film's vampire lore, Remick couldn't link together with his people, or Sammy would have lost his gift by becoming a vampire. What makes it even worse is that Remick and other vampires, through their enhanced senses and greater spiritual understanding, can see these spirits in these sacred rituals and celebrations. He saw something he couldn't have, something that he hasn't had in centuries. Yeah, it's like a massive cosmic middle finger to the people that are and become vampires. Remick wasn't pure evil either, despite what the humans thought of him. He was broken evil, not a devil, as what was seemingly framed by the writing and perceived by the characters. Yes, he did evil things, like turning humans against their will, and acted in a way that was sadly similar to those who forced religion onto him centuries ago, and did actually use racism at one point in the movie for his benefit. This was only for survival to escape the Choctaw vampire hunters, so he could get into the racist couple's home to escape and feed, rather than actually believing that bullshit. I'm not justifying his worst actions, I just empathize with his character, given the hardships he suffered and the cruel deal he got in life. Another thing is, Remick truly believed he was doing the right thing in the movie. He believed he was bringing people together by turning them, and we saw no division or segregation amongst his thralls. The racist couple were literally no longer white supremacists when they became vampires. They shared Remick's belief in racial equality and his respect for the black community and what the juke joint represented. Remick wanted to meld his original culture with the culture the black community had built. When he and his thralls sang and danced to the rocky road of Dublin, this presented this desire for people to connect and celebrate with one another. People calling him the devil and a manipulator. I can see why they're pushing that, I just don't think that's the case. He and his thralls were honest and clear about what they believed in. Yes, this was shaped by Remick's own beliefs, and wanted to liberate the remaining human characters from the cruelty life had thrown them. They even informed them of what Hogwood and the clan had planned for them with the mill, and had done this more than once. He even planned to deal with them as well. I'm admittedly sad we didn't get to see the look on those racist assholes' faces to see the vampires, including Bert and Joan, fighting together to destroy them and their evil. It was also revealed the vampires still had their personalities. This was made clear as right before and during when Smoke killed Annie, Mary screamed out in concern and worry for her friend. As she rushed to help her, though it was too late, again, there's no vampire speed, Stat convinced her to flee and escape, out of fear of her also being killed. There wasn't an absence of compassion or respect amongst the vampires. This is another element of what made the story so sad. They genuinely believed they were doing good by turning the humans, not because they hated them or any foundational elements to their cultures. Remick and his thralls welcomed newly turned vampires with open arms. There was no infighting or fighting over rank or establishing dominance crap. They genuinely cared about each other and others. It's another reason why their deaths were so tragic, not just because they died in physical agony and torture from the sunlight. Remek's death was arguably the most agonizing, plus being the most fucked up given the writing. In some ways even more tragic. When we saw Sammy's gift, that's possibly the first time he had hope for his life in centuries, since we didn't get any explanation for his history with the Choctaw. I can only speculate what happened there. He believed he was going to see his dead community again. He thought he was turning the humans so they could share in the community that had love and fellowship. The singing and dancing the rocky road to Dublin with his thralls was little doubt the happiest he'd been in a long time. He was living his culture, one that was forever altered and nearly wiped out. And maybe he had a part of him that hoped he was reconnecting with his old community. I've also seen people comment on YouTube about how if Remek had been more honest about himself, the Irish part, and had put the same heart within the first song he performed like he did with the Rocky Road to Dublin, perhaps even with a chorus too, or formed a song for the people at the juke joint, and specifically just to share the music with them rather than just to get into the joint to get Sammy, he may have been invited in. That would have made for another great scene. Yet in his last moments he was staked through the heart and burned alive by the sun, dying a torturous death. Now I feel just to be clear about this, there is no perfect person or culture. They're not monuments to total goodness or flawlessness. Remek did do evil things. I don't deny that. His inspiration, death from Puss in Boots' The Last Wish, was shown to have sadistic characteristics, which Remek shared in moments in the film, including to those he sought to help, which obviously didn't aid his goal. I just feel both in his world and in the writing, he got screwed over, and I can respect the parts of his character I feel are worthy of respect, and I hope he found peace in death, hopefully reuniting with his community, and that their legacy still lives on. He wasn't the devil. He wasn't even the greatest evil of the story. That was Hogwood and his clansmen, characters who I didn't feel bad for in the slightest when they were gunned down by smoke. I guess at least the typical Christian religious element, which I don't really think would do anything to vampires, wasn't what ended up killing him, or even hurt him. It would have been another cosmic middle finger to Remek if the bastardized and cruel form of Christianity had ended up killing him after it destroyed his human life. Still, his death is one of my most hated scenes in the movie, and it was a real injustice to his character. For the movie in its entirety, I gotta say, it really has proven to be bold and honest in its story and messages. Sinners brought to life complex characters within a story shaped by some of the most evil parts of humanity in history. We also saw the goodness of people coming together to heal and celebrate despite the hardships and honoring their heritage. For the human elements, while there were very few errors in the historical context, that didn't mean the importance of the messages were less significant or impactful. It pushed that history shouldn't be forgotten about, to recognize the bad and see the resilience of communities that had been targets of bigotry. It's just sad to see while the human and historical elements in the movie were so well done, that the vampires weren't done the justice they deserved, especially Remek. Though I can't think of many vampire stories that do justice to them. Still, there's some souls in them not being the evil that they were believed to be, as both they and the protagonist, the sinner, show it in their own ways and in their lives. Just because something is denounced and declared as sin doesn't mean it isn't truly sacred. Now, I'd like to hear what y'all have to say. What did you think and feel about Sinners? I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all next time.